So it seems that it's already time for the most powerful army in 40k to get a few choice nerfs. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking about the Tyranids rules update and their FAQ for the codex that has been surprisingly punitive. Usually when Games Workshop do their FAQs for each codex that's dropped, they usually tend to be fairly on the restrained side and only fixing wording that doesn't really work within the book and making it functional. It seems though with Tyranids that they've decided to make a bit of an exception. As well as clarifications and fixing a few unintended interactions, they have gone wholesale and just changed a fair few rules, trying to rein in a few of the biggest excesses of the army. The Maleceptor does seem to have caught a fair few bits, with some other changes happening for the Hive Tyrants and Hive Fleet Leviathan. On the whole, I do feel it's probably a good decision to tone things down a little bit. It seems that after the first couple of weeks of tournament results, Tyranids do appear to be running rampant. They're currently near enough without question the strongest faction in 40k, and if Games Workshop does manage to address their power a bit, then I feel like we might be looking at one of the more balanced states of 9th edition for really quite a long time. If we get into the changes then, I would still say that this is more of an FAQ with some small rules changes as opposed to sweeping nerfs like you might see in the balanced data slate, but a few of these rule changes do tend to affect some of the very most powerful things that Tyranids can do, so I think they will be felt pretty hard by the army. First up is a straight up change to the stratagem Encircle the Prey. This is the one that allows you to remove a fly or burrowers unit from the board. Basically at the end of your turn they just jump into the sky and go back into reserve, and it was perhaps most problematically used with the Hive Tyrant with wings. This thing can be enormously killy in combat. It means that you could throw it forward with absolutely no regard to its life and safety, chop up something key in the enemy army, then jump into ongoing reserve to make sure that you're not hit in return. It could mean that its charge was a little bit less reliable the turn after, but it's still a whole load more powerful than the thing being just killed straight out by it being badly positioned. Now instead it happens at the end of the movement phase, so basically if you want to encircle the prey and jump off the board, then it means that you're going to have to give up on the turn's damage to do so. It's going to make it a stratagem that you really just don't want to use on something like a massive Hive Tyrant that you've invested loads of points in, and perhaps just be a bit more focused on what they were probably intending it to be used for, things like gargoyles jumping around and encircling the enemy, doing gamey things with objectives. It certainly hasn't entirely fixed the idea that a tyrant can hit you very hard then run away. That overrun stratagem still exists and that's still very very powerful, but it means that if the Hive Tyrant can't actually kill whatever they were in combat with, then you're not going to be able to use that one. I think it's a good change. Being able to hit the enemy as hard as you want with your most powerful piece and guarantee that you can keep it safe is a very powerful move, and it's not a bad one to restrict. Otherwise, it may be a more expected nerf. The Hive Tyrant on foot is no longer able to take double heavy venom cannons. That one totally did seem like a typo in the wording of the datasheet. It seemed like the intention was to be able to not take two, as they said you can't take both a venom cannon and a stranglethorn cannon, but they didn't actually forbid you taking two of one of them. That one means that you basically just can't have a gun turret Hive Tyrant sat at the back of the board, pumping out 6 very accurate damage 4 shots, and gaining the Lookout Sir rule to be untargetable from Tyrant Guard nearby. It looks like foot Hive Tyrants will be taking a bit more of a mixed approach. I think the regular heavy venom cannon plus the bone sword still seems a very solid combo. Really though, the biggest hammer blow of the nerf fell on the Maleceptor. I think out of anything in Codex Tyranids, it perhaps was the most busted thing in the book. All we had to do was combine one synaptic imperative, the buff from a neurothrope, and a 1 command point stratagem, and this thing could easily be averaging 15 to 20 mortal wounds in a single psychic phase. And what was particularly painful was that quite a lot of those mortal wounds didn't even need line of sight, so you could just hoover up a whole bunch of enemies even if they were safe behind terrain. Now there's a combo of 2 different changes that basically means that's not going to happen anywhere near as much. First up, the stratagem that you'd often use to get an extra cast on this thing, the power of the Hive Mind, that's been flat up changed so you can only use it on characters now, not on the Maleceptor. If that allows you to get an extra smite off on this guy, then that would trigger his ability to give you an extra 3 mortal wounds within 12 inches, so that could potentially reduce his damage output by as much as 6 or more mortal wounds per turn. It was a pretty crazy damage output boost for just a single command point, so I'm not surprised that they've scrapped it. It does also mean that Zoanthropes are caught in the collateral damage to that. They'd normally want to be casting Smite anyway, but this does mean that they won't be casting Smite at the same time as casting a Hive Mind Psychic power if you needed to use their own one. The next one cuts down on Maleceptor powers even further. Psychic Oversight is a synaptic imperative that allows you to do an action and also cast. Rather than actually update the wording, they've issued an FAQ for this, just saying that if you're casting a psychic action, it does take the slot of casting 1 power, so it basically means that between these two changes, your Maleceptors are only casting 2 powers per turn. Personally, I feel like this is a rules change. Regardless of their intentions, I believe that you could cast the psychic action and it wouldn't count as an additional cast, as they are technically different things. So again, I would say that this is a flat up nerf to the Maleceptor. It also does make that imperative just a little bit weaker on the whole, particularly for other psychers who aren't getting a 3 mortal wound boost out of it. Finally, one more small clarification, they've said that in Rage Reserves, an adaptive physiology that counts you as more wounds than you would be for your vehicle damage table. That one doesn't apply to the Maleceptor's table of mortal wound damage output, which I think was already the case rules as written technically, as that wasn't actually on the damage table, that was later on the datasheet. It didn't seem to be the most common pick in lists as far as I could see, but anyway, that is confirmed that that doesn't affect the Maleceptor's psychic backlash. Overall, between these, I feel like the Maleceptor is looking a lot more middle of the road than it was. Still with a Neurothrope and a couple of Witchfires, you could easily be casting out around about 10 wounds per turn. It's hardly like it's useless, but its theoretical damage output has taken a massive hit. It's going to feel a little bit more painful to put your best spells on it and give it the Neurothrope buff if it's not going to be causing quite the same level of carnage. There's a fair few other changes as well. Out of these, I'll describe the first one as a nerf, and most of the rest just bug fixes. The important one is the change to Hive Nexus, the Hive Fleet Leviathan psychic power, which on reading the codex I did think that that was a particularly powerful one, as it basically allows you to put a synaptic imperative out of turn on any one Tyranids creature. It meant that you could be throwing, say, a 4+ invul on a Tyrannofex, for example, or making a Hive Tyrant more dangerous in combat with exploding 6s to hit in melee. They've decided to change this one so it only applies to core units now, which means that a lot of its most powerful uses are just going to fall completely by the wayside. I feel like this one is a definite nerf to Hive Fleet Leviathan as a whole, as this was one of the biggest draws to playing them, along with the transhuman physiology thing. And again, it does seem like it's a further nerf to the Maleceptor and the Hive Tyrants. I feel like perhaps the best use of this one will be applying that to a big Tyranid warrior blob now. Get them all exploding 6s to hit at range or in melee, or give them that 4+ invul save along with Leviathan's transhuman, and it still feels like it to be a solidly powerful buff to go around. Next up, Synapse has been changed to be an aura, a tag that it was missing when the codex came out. I guess they did sound like they functioned like auras, but it wasn't explicitly stated. Feels like a bit of a double-edged sword, that one. It does mean that any abilities that boost auras and make them go further will be good, but a fair few armies do have abilities that can turn off auras, and if they casually turned off Synapse, it could make your little bugs run away a fair bit more. Next up, the wording to overrun has been clarified a bit. This is the melee stratagem that the Hive Tyrant likes to use: jump in, kill everything around it, and then provided there aren't any enemies within engagement range, it can casually just jump away back to safety. This one might have been a target to be nerfed, but it seems like they haven't done. They've just tweaked the wording slightly, which was a little bit ambiguous. They said it happened at the end of the fight phase, and also instead of making a consolidation move. The two things were a bit different, as the consolidation move might well not have been at the end of the fight phase, so it was perhaps a bit confusing. They've just chosen to remove the instead of consolidation thing. It's still very strong, and now that you can't jump the Hive Tyrant off the board with Encircle the Prey, it does become a lot more about making sure that you actually kill your target, so hopefully you're able to use this to get safe. Otherwise, Zoanthropes gained the Synapse keyword. Not really a surprise there, that one just looked like it was a complete oversight. The Tyrannocyte had a misprinted battlefield role. They have clarified that it is, yes, indeed a transport. Adaptive physiologies are the points cost upgrades that you can get for non-character, non-titanic monsters. They have stated that only Hive Tendril monsters can use those, so you couldn't have it on any monsters that happen to originate from Genestealer cults, not that they have any. And I guess it forbids you from using it on unaligned ambles. Finally, the Spore Node secondary, they've just removed a sentence that seemed redundant. If you do the action to set up a Spore Node objective marker, you already had to be in the right place for it, so that anywhere that you could set it up within 1 inch of the unit would be in the right place. So it just seems they've removed the stipulation to be in your opponent's territory. Overall though, in terms of reining in the Tyranids just a little bit, I think this FAQ is quite a good start. I honestly wasn't expecting quite as major changes from this one. Usually they tend to be very light touch on the FAQs and save the rebalancing for later down the line. I think Tyranids are still looking awesomely strong out of this. I feel like the biggest change might be that Maleceptors aren't just an absolute auto-include anymore, though I still think they're usable. Let me know what you think though down in the comments below. I'm always interested to hear your thoughts and opinions. If you've been enjoying, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, while I'll certainly keep up with Games Workshop's news and releases. And if you have been watching quite a bit, I'd just like to quickly mention the channel's Patreon page, which you can find down in the video description below. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits every month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.